Avoidants will never admit they are obsessed with you, so they hide it behind sophisticated psychological games that are designed to keep you thinking about them while maintaining their emotional distance. See, most women think that when an avoidant man is playing games, it means he's not interested or he's just being cruel. But the truth is far more complex. The games themselves are often evidence of obsession. I know it sounds illogical, but the more obsessed they are, the more elaborate and frequent these psychological manipulations become. And the reason they choose to play these games instead of simply admitting their obsession is because these games require an enormous amount of mental and emotional energy to orchestrate and maintain. Someone who truly doesn't care about you wouldn't invest the psychological effort required to create elaborate manipulation strategies designed to control your emotional state and keep you thinking about them. The sophistication of these games reveals the depth of their obsession. They're not just casually dating or keeping their options open, they're actively studying your responses, monitoring your behavior patterns, and strategically adjusting their tactics based on your reactions. This level of psychological manipulation requires intense focus and emotional investment. Think about it. Truly indifferent people simply disappear or treat you with consistent indifference. But obsessed avoidants create complex psychological scenarios designed to maintain connection while avoiding vulnerability. They're simultaneously trying to keep you close and push you away, which requires them to be constantly thinking about you and the dynamic between you. That's why the games themselves become evidence of their attachment, because each manipulation tactic is designed to elicit a specific response from you. The more elaborate and frequent these games become, the more they reveal that you've gotten under their skin in ways they can't control or admit. Hi, I'm Gabriel Hart from My Daily Love, and in this video we'll talk about the 6 specific mind games that reveal an avoidant man's hidden obsession and why these manipulations are actually proof of their attachment. And once you recognize these games as evidence of obsession rather than indifference, you'll not only be able to protect yourself from their psychological manipulation, but you'll also be able to see through their emotional armor to understand what's really driving their behavior. Game number 1, selective silence. The most common mind game avoidant men play when they're obsessed with you is strategic silence. They go quiet just to see if you'll break first, because the silence isn't actually absence. It's psychological bait designed to test your attachment and trigger your pursuit. When an avoidant man suddenly stops responding to your texts, stops initiating contact, or becomes mysteriously unavailable, your first instinct might be to think he's lost interest. But if this silence comes after periods of intense connection or intimacy, it's likely a calculated test. The psychology behind selective silence is sophisticated. They're using your attachment to them as a weapon against you. They know that their sudden absence will create anxiety, confusion, and the urge to reach out and reconnect. This game serves multiple purposes for them. It tests how much you care. Will you break the silence? It gives them a sense of control. They're managing the pace of communication, and it keeps you thinking about them even when they're not present. The obsession reveals itself in the timing and pattern of these silences. If they were truly indifferent, the silence would be consistent and permanent. But obsessed avoidants use silence strategically, pulling back just enough to create anxiety, then returning just enough to keep you hooked. The key insight is that truly disinterested people don't play games. They just disappear. The fact that they're using silence as a tool reveals that they're very much invested in your response and your emotional state. Game number 2, jealousy triggers. Here's what most women don't recognize as a sign of avoidant obsession. When they drop subtle hints about other people being interested in them or casually mention their dating options because they can't confess their attachment to you, so they try to provoke yours instead. Obsessed avoidants often engage in what psychologists call triangulation, introducing the idea of third parties to create jealousy and test your emotional investment. They might mention how someone at work has been flirting with them, casually bring up an ex who's been texting, or make vague references to their dating options. This behavior reveals obsession because truly confident, unattached people don't need to create jealousy to feel secure. But avoidants who are secretly obsessed with you use jealousy as a way to gauge your feelings without having to reveal their own. The game works by making you feel like you need to compete for their attention or prove your interest. They're essentially trying to trigger the same obsessive feelings in you that they're experiencing but can't admit to having. The obsession shows in how carefully they watch your reaction to these jealousy triggers. They're not actually interested in these other people. They're interested in how the mention of these people affects you. This game also serves their ego by making them feel desired and in demand, which helps them cope with the vulnerability they feel from being obsessed with you. So, how do you actually protect yourself when you're dealing with someone who's using obsession-driven mind games to manipulate your emotions? The real challenge is that these games are just the surface level of their deception. Underneath each psychological manipulation is a web of lies designed to keep you confused, reactive, and emotionally invested while they maintain complete control. Most women recognize the games too late, after they've already been emotionally manipulated and hurt by the deeper lies that make these games possible. The truth is, understanding that his games reveal obsession is only valuable if you can also spot the lies he tells to cover his tracks, justify his behavior, and keep you from seeing the full picture of his manipulation tactics. These lies are often what make the game so effective. He'll lie about his intentions, his feelings, and even his reasons for playing games in the first place. That's why we created How to Spot His Lies. Because recognizing his mind games means nothing if you can't detect the sophisticated lies that make those games work. When you can identify both his games and his lies, you can protect yourself from the emotional manipulation before it damages your self-worth and mental health. Instead of being hurt by his deceptive tactics, you'll have the clarity to see through his entire system of manipulation. Check the link in the description. This could finally give you the tools to protect yourself from his obsession-driven deception. Game number 3. Emotional breadcrumbs. What if those random late-night "I miss you" texts or sudden vulnerable moments aren't spontaneous emotions but calculated moves? Obsessed avoidants drop just enough genuine emotion to keep you invested while maintaining complete control over the level of intimacy. This game involves giving you small tastes of the emotional connection you crave: a vulnerable text at 2 a.m., a moment of genuine intimacy during a casual encounter, or a sudden confession of feelings, followed immediately by emotional retreat. The psychology is manipulative, but reveals deep obsession. They're so consumed with thoughts of you that they can't help but reach out, but they're so terrified of vulnerability that they immediately pull back after showing any real emotion. These breadcrumbs serve multiple purposes. They keep you hoping for more emotional connection. They satisfy their need to express some of their obsessive feelings without full vulnerability, and they maintain their sense of control by determining when and how much emotion gets shared. The obsession reveals itself in the timing and content of these breadcrumbs. They often come when you've started to pull away or seem less available, suggesting they're monitoring your emotional state and responding strategically. The cruelty of this game is that it gives you just enough hope to stay invested while never providing the consistent emotional availability you actually need for a healthy relationship. Game number 4. Testing your boundaries. While healthy people respect boundaries, obsessed avoidants constantly test yours. Cancelling plans last minute, pulling away after intimacy, then watching to see if you'll still chase, because boundary testing reveals how much power they have and how much poor treatment you'll tolerate. This game involves systematically pushing against your stated boundaries to see what they can get away with. They might consistently show up late, cancel plans at the last minute, be emotionally unavailable after intimate moments, or ignore your requests for consistency and communication. The obsession reveals itself in how systematically and repeatedly they test these boundaries. If they were truly indifferent, they would either respect your boundaries or simply leave. But obsessed avoidants need to know exactly how much control they have over you. Each boundary violation is a test. Will you enforce your standards? Will you lower your expectations? Will you continue to accept poor treatment because of your feelings for them? The psychological purpose is to establish a dynamic where they have maximum freedom and minimum accountability while keeping you emotionally invested enough to tolerate their behavior. This game also serves their fear of abandonment. By testing your boundaries, they're essentially asking, how much can I hurt you before you leave me? The fact that they need this information reveals how much they fear losing you. But here's what most women don't realize about these boundary tests. There are specific moments during their testing when your response determines whether you gain power in the dynamic or accidentally teach them that your boundaries are negotiable. Most women respond at the wrong times or in ways that actually encourage more boundary violations. Understanding the psychology behind when and how they test boundaries reveals the exact moments when your response has maximum impact on either stopping the games or accidentally reinforcing them. The difference between women who successfully end these games and those who get trapped in them forever comes down to recognizing these critical testing moments and responding in ways that make the games backfire. Comment testing, and I'll reveal the 3 specific moments when avoidant men test boundaries most intensely. and exactly how to respond to make their games backfire and force them to either respect you or remove themselves from your life. Game number 5, copying your detachment. Avoidant men who are obsessed with you will mirror your emotional distance, but with extra intensity, and this copying behavior is actually a hidden admission that they're tracking your every emotional move obsessively, because truly indifferent people don't monitor and mirror your behavior patterns. When you start to pull back, become less available, or show less interest, an obsessed avoidant will immediately mirror that energy, but they'll often take it further than you did, as if to prove they can be more detached than you. This mirroring reveals obsession because it shows they're paying incredibly close attention to your emotional state and behavioral patterns. They're not just living their own life. They're constantly monitoring yours and adjusting their behavior in response. The psychology behind this game is competitive and defensive. They can't stand the idea that you might be less attached than they are, so they try to out-detach you to maintain their sense of emotional superiority. The obsession shows in how quickly and precisely they mirror your changes. If you take a day to respond to texts, they'll take 2 days. If you seem less interested, they'll act completely indifferent. This isn't coincidence. It's calculated response. This game also serves their ego protection. By mirroring and amplifying your detachment, they can tell themselves that they care less than you do, which helps them cope with their own obsessive feelings. Game number 6. Creating emotional cliffhangers. Here's the most sophisticated mind game obsessed avoidants play. They create emotional cliffhangers by ending conversations abruptly, dropping half-truths, or leaving you guessing about their intentions, because obsession makes them crave control, and keeping you unsettled means they're always on your mind. This game involves deliberately creating unresolved tension and unanswered questions that keep you mentally engaged with them even when they're not present. They might end conversations mid-thought, hint at important information without providing details, or make cryptic statements that leave you wondering what they really meant. The psychology is sophisticated. They understand that unresolved tension creates mental preoccupation. By leaving things unfinished or unclear, they ensure that you'll be thinking about them and trying to figure out what they meant or what happens next. This reveals obsession because it shows they're strategically managing your mental and emotional state. They want to be on your mind constantly, and cliffhangers are an effective way to achieve that without having to be emotionally available themselves. The game serves their need for control and attention while protecting them from vulnerability. They get to occupy your thoughts and emotions without having to reciprocate with their own emotional availability. The obsession shows in how carefully crafted these cliffhangers are. They're not accidental or natural conversation endings. They're deliberately designed to create maximum curiosity and mental engagement. Now, please listen carefully because this is very important. When you understand these 6 mind games as evidence of an avoidant man's hidden obsession, you realize that their psychological manipulations aren't proof of indifference. They're proof of how much mental and emotional energy they're investing in controlling your responses and keeping you thinking about them. The selective silence, jealousy triggers, emotional breadcrumbs, boundary testing, copying your detachment, and emotional cliffhangers all reveal someone who is completely consumed with managing the dynamic between you. But here's what most women don't expect when they finally recognize these games as obsession rather than rejection. They start wondering, what happens when I stop playing along? What occurs in an avoidant man's mind when I don't react the way his games are designed to make me react? What psychological shift happens when I stay silent longer than he expected, when I don't chase his breadcrumbs, when I don't respond to his jealousy triggers? See, all of these mind games are designed around the assumption that you'll react predictably, that you'll break the silence first, chase the breadcrumbs, respond to the jealousy triggers, and stay mentally engaged with their cliffhangers. But what happens when you don't? When you stay silent longer than they expected? When you don't respond to their psychological bait, when you refuse to play the games they've designed to control your emotional state? It creates a psychological crisis they never anticipated. Their entire manipulation strategy depends on your predictable responses. When you become unpredictable, when you don't react according to their script, when you stay silent beyond their comfort zone, it forces them to confront some uncomfortable truths about their own obsession and the games they've been playing. The silence that was supposed to make you chase them suddenly becomes a mirror that reflects their own attachment. The games that were supposed to keep you thinking about them suddenly reveal how much they've been thinking about you. That's why understanding what avoidants realize when you stay silent longer than expected is crucial, because it reveals the moment when their psychological games backfire and force them to confront their own obsession and the depth of their attachment to you. So if you want to understand the psychological awakening that happens when an avoidant man's manipulation tactics fail and he's forced to confront his own obsessive feelings, then our new video will reveal what they finally realize when you refuse to play their games. Please click on the video that's showing on the screen right now and you'll see their awakening unfold.